American history, the salient feature of American history is not democracy. That was invented in 450 BC by Pericles. And the salient feature in American history is not slavery. If you read the Bible, you'll find that we had slaves in the Bible. And the Romans and the Greeks, when they went to war, when you lost, you were a slave, and that was part of the deal. You just understood that. But what's unique about American history is the relationship of black and white people, because we took slaves because of their skin color, and that is unique in American history. The great American novel, Huckleberry Finn, characterizes the great moral dilemma in America when Jim, the slave, is being taken down the river by Huckleberry Finn, and Huckleberry Finn knows that if he brings him down the river, he'll go to hell. But he loves his friend Jim, and he has to decide whether to love his friend and help him be free or go to hell. And he decides to go to hell. And it's the great moral dilemma in America that characterizes everything we do. As art reflects our culture, and that is the salient feature of our culture. And one of the types of culture that we have is rock and roll. What it does, rock and roll expresses the relationship between the black and the white races. The white people contributed things like temperament, where the frets are on the guitar. They contributed theories of harmony, the tonality and tertiary harmonies that we have. They contributed the instruments that we actually play. The black people contributed the melodic scales that we use, the minor pentatonic, known as the blues scale. They contributed the dynamic rhythms that we have, and the emphasis on color, the various sonorities that we have. So it's a relationship of the black and the white races. And Hendrix came along. Hendrix was one of the two great geniuses in rock and roll history. The only greater genius in Hendrix was Elvis. And Elvis was a genius of a different sort. He was a social genius and presented something in American history that was brand new. The young white kids had more disposable income and more leisure time than had ever been presented, because there was this whole generation that had come from the Second World War, the baby boomers. The men were so glad that when they got home from the Second World War and alive, they drank more and they had more sex than had ever been had before, and they had more children. And so when they got to be teenagers, there was money and power in America, and we needed a music to express that, and Elvis brought that to us. So he was a great social genius, but Hendrix was a great musical genius. And you know what the people say, you can't compare apples and oranges, and that's not true. You can compare a good apple with a fabulous orange and say, this fabulous orange is better. So the second greatest guitar genius in the 20th century was Andre Segovia. Different style, people say you can't compare him. That's not true. He did not compare, although he was incredibly influential, with the genius of Hendrix. Hendrix's, the first most important album in rock and roll history was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and the reason was, musicologists don't judge something by its beauty or its record sales, which are important, but what they judge it by is its influence. If what I did changed you, then it's an important record. So the most important record in rock and roll was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and the reason was it's the aesthetic. And aesthetic means the theory of beauty. The theory of beauty prior to 1967 was, if my record made you dance, either fast or slow, it was a good record. If it didn't do that, it was a bad record. But Sgt. Pepper's was the first album that was supposed to be sat down and listened to as art. It wasn't rock and roll anymore, it became rock. It became an art form. And that's the most important, influential album in rock and roll. But the second most important one was Hendrix's Are You Experience, because it did something that it changed the aesthetic of rock and roll history. And the guitar, because of Hendrix's unbelievable intellectual and emotional genius and technical genius, all three of those levels, that was so unspeakably, indescribably beautiful, like no one had ever seen before. If you put all the guitar players together, they still couldn't have matched what he could do in his pinky. And he made the guitar equal to the vocals, and that had never been. The guitar had always been a subservient, serving role prior to that, but that guitar was so beautiful that it elevated and it changed rock and roll more fundamentally than anything than Sgt. Pepper. That's one thing. So that's his major contribution. Is he brought the guitar equal to the vocals. But there's a history behind Hendrix.